Hello Power, Happiness and Success family. This video is for anyone out there who wants to stop the habit, the addiction of negative thinking and negative feeling. Let's dive straight in. So as you can imagine, it's incredibly complicated. The many processes, internal and external processes that take part in ascertaining our level of thinking in terms of its positivity, negativity, and the subsequent feelings that ensue as well. So let's dive straight in. What we have to comprehend is that if we want to change something in our lives, if you want to become more positive, more enlightened, more conscious, happier, all the more peaceful, more abundant, develop that growth mindset, all of these really fundamental, crucial things that improve the quality of our lives. What we have to understand is that we cannot do that using our existing thinking and so on and so forth, okay? Quite essentially, I'll return to this later on as well. If we want better results, we have to have new thoughts. And I know you're probably thinking, well, you know, Alex, how hard is that to have a new thought? I mean, I can force myself to think something new right now. You know, I've never thought that thought before, that thought before. I can understand that. And, you know, good for you. It's a little bit more complicated than that because we're battling so many powerful forces here. Firstly, we're battling our own primitive brain. That's right. The brains that we've developed biologically over the last 200,000 plus years, being Homo sapiens, and I'm going back to that kind of caveman and cavewoman kind of primitive brain, the reptilian brain that still exists in all human beings. It exists in me, it exists in you, and that reptilian brain its primary focus is survival and reproduction. Okay, very basic. It's essentially the same as a lizard's brain. And this is key because this is one of the main factors that's inducing a lot of our pain, a lot of our suffering, a lot of our negativity. And yes, our thoughts can make us suffer, it can make us sick, and our thoughts can also heal us and make us happier. So it's about channeling our thinking, and I'm going to teach you how to do that as this video continues. So what we have to understand is that we need new thoughts in order to get to better results. Now, the challenge is this. We all think between 60 to 70,000 thoughts approximately every single day. And the challenge also is that 90% of these thoughts tend to be the same kind of thoughts, or near enough the same, every single as the previous day. Why is that? I'm going to return to this several times throughout, and that's because a lot of people do see and experience the same kind of things every single day. Like an exaggeration, hyperbole here is living through Groundhog Day. I'm sure you've seen that movie. And, you know, the challenges that happen is that when we see the same and we do the same sort of things, you know, if you drink from the same mug or cup, if you eat from the same plates, in the same chair, in the same position, if you watch the same TV shows, if you drive to the same places, you know, if you wear the same outfits or the way that wear the same shoes, or if you interact with the same people or use the same kind of register, listen to the same kind of music, go to the same kind of trips and holidays, read the same kind of book, or not read at all for that matter, which is even worse. And if you exercise in the same sorts of ways, if you do these sort of things at the same kind of times, what happens is you hardwire your brain into thinking and feeling in certain specific ways. And our thoughts influence our emotions influence our thoughts. It goes back and forth in this kind of feedback loop that we actually become addicted to, and I'll talk about that a bit later on as well. So yes, if we want to create better results in our lives, we need to be a new person. We literally have to change our personality types. Now, I know what you're thinking, Alex, well, become a new person, you've lost the plot. What are you on about? Well, no, not really. What happens is this. Your thoughts influence your emotions, the chemicals that they produce in your brain. Your emotions influence your behaviors. Your behaviors determine your mood, your attitudes. Your attitudes over time influence your beliefs, what you believe about yourself. A belief is just a neural pattern in the brain. It's when thoughts have been repeated and also reinforced over time. So it's become a subconscious patterns. Your beliefs are subconscious patterns. And they usually associate the terms I am as well, which is when we are commanding ourselves into a destiny. We're projecting how life is going to be for us now and also in the future, and all these sorts of really fundamental, crucial ways of working. And our beliefs influence our personality traits, our temperament, our personality traits is like a branch connecting to our overall identity. Many branches are comprised and they join together to comprise who we are, our identity, meaning our possessions, our labels, who we are not, what we identify with, and all these sorts of things. And we even become addicted to all sorts of internal processes as well as external things. So it's not just like smoking the bad tobacco or drinking alcohol or having illicit drugs, or even healthier things like eating organic earth-grown foods or do whatever. It's not just external habits and external things that you eat or consume that influence us. We become addicted to our own thinking and the patterns that develop as a result. So yes, before we move on, if we're going to change our thinking, and that's essentially what this video is about, eliminating or eradicating negativity, negative thinking, negative emotions, and so on and so forth, we have to work and change our unconscious programming. That's right. Firstly, 95% or more of our beliefs, our perceptions, our emotions, our behaviors are subconscious programs. That just means that we do certain things every single day without consciously being aware of it. That's why you could be thinking a certain way, or you lose track of time and then you end up being somewhere else. You're like, how did I get here? I didn't even, the last few processes, what just happened? That's a subconscious program. Meaning, and all that means is that when you do certain behaviors specifically, over time we begin to associate with who we are, and then automatically when we assume something to be who we are, it turns into an automatic response, an automatic program, because we connect behaviors, thoughts, emotions to our identity, and therefore we want to be consistent with who we are. And our unconscious loves familiarity. It wants to know, and it wants to be safe and secure. Your unconscious, however, you're exemplified through your body. By the way, your body's learned to do things better than your mind. That's why you start doing things and you're like, why am I doing this? Why am I feeling it? Why do I feel this way? Why am I feeling lethargic and tired or exhausted or sad or depressed or frustrated or angry? Nothing's actually happened to me today. Why am I feeling that way? It's because you've taught yourself to experience those emotions and those feelings so often that you just turn it on at will, and you don't even need to have a reason anymore. You genuinely don't have to have an experience happening right in front of you in order for you to be triggered, if you will, by that. Just your thinking alone, your subconscious programs alone, can manifest a whole like cascade of pain and negative programming. But I'm going to teach you how you can eradicate that. So let's now move on to stress. Now, stress is very much closely aligned with our emotions, with fear. Stress is fear. It's like a sophisticated person's version of fear. Sophisticated people don't get anxious, they just get stressed. And yes, stress is connected to our egos. And whenever our egos are at play, there's always a sense of lack and incompleteness. And that insufficiency, that feeling of inadequacy is what kind of spurs that stress response, because we feel like we're always being threatened. We feel like we have to always be defensive and really overly and excessively aware of what's happening, and that spurs our compulsive thinking about, and then we start getting caught up in our own thinking. We become very much internal negatively, and we start to change our physiology and our state of being, and we start to think about the pain of the past, or start to think about how the past is going to influence the future. Because when most people think about the future, they're actually utilizing their past, their beliefs, which is just a record of the past, like a historical artifact. They just start connecting the past and they use that to project their future. But the whole point of this video is to help you to overcome that process and start through mental rehearsing, visualization, positivity, affirmations, incantations, anchoring, changing your physiology, having certain stances that you hold, like all these sorts of things. Those kind of stances increase testosterone, increase risk-taking ability, increase confidence, whilst simultaneously decreasing cortisol, the stress hormone, and all these sorts of things. So yeah, there are so many different factors, so many great strategies to utilize, and I'll talk to you a bit later on about neuroplasticity and how that stimulates neurogenesis, the creation of new neurons in the hippocampus, to make you more intelligent, but also to give you the power, the wherewithal to be able to change as well. So there are so many different things that we're going to discuss. I hope you're ready. I hope you've got a notepad and pen ready to rock and roll with me here. So yes, the hormones of stress turn on our circuits, and it makes us act out of survival mode. Okay, when you are in survival mode, I'm going to give you the metaphor of like when you're just about able to keep your head above water. if you went out to him and said, listen, can you help solve this equation for me? I'm really struggling with something. Like, listen, now's not the time, and they kind of overreact and they feel guilty or bad afterwards. It's because they're acting in survival mode. Now is not the time to go and pester them and disturb them. They're just about struggling to keep on top of things. And obviously, our own brain, when we become so narrow-minded and involved with our egoic minds and our conditioned consciousness, of course, we're going to kind of only be more selfish and focused on ourselves because we're trying to survive. We're in that survival response that's been triggered and turned on. And you know, things like deep breathing and changing your brainwave states, which I'll speak about a bit later, that will enable you to kind of change your brain frequency, change your programming, so you can be far more relaxed, peaceful, abundant, think more clearly, make better choices. Because when you're acting out of the stress response, right, you don't process information as well. Like, you become more defensive, you have a negative perspective on things, you think more in a cynical fashion on all these sorts of things, as opposed to being more optimistic, open-minded, seeing the positives of things, and when people behave in certain ways, you see it in a more positive light, rather than thinking, what did they mean by that? Are they trying to insult me? Are they threatened by me? Do they think I'm not good enough? And all these sorts of negative responses that and perspectives that occur when we are in that negative response. So as it relates to stress, you know, the majority of the people living in Western society, we spend 70% of our entire lives living in chronic stress, which is just stress that is continuing, and that's completely inappropriate and it's unnatural in many ways. You know, animals and creatures, like, we are built to tolerate short-term periods of stress, so literally lasting between seconds and minutes, like when we have to fight off a prey or a predator and all these sorts of things. And that's appropriate. And, you know, we're meant to go back to homeostasis, we're meant to be balanced again and continue to function with our day, you know. But the problem is as follows: people have taught themselves over time to turn on stress response just by thought alone. So that's why your thinking can have the same visceral and physiological effects as though you were operating in fight or flight response. Like, it has the same physiological response. So if you're thinking something really negative, you know, you're gonna be, you know, someone's gonna leave you, you're gonna lose someone, you're gonna lose your job, you know, something that threatens your own identity, like an investment's gonna go down the pan, your business is gonna get bankrupt, you're gonna be laid off, or, you know, you're going to get in an accident, or something traumatic's going to happen to you in your life, or something's going to threaten your worth, or whatever, what have you. Those kind of thoughts make you feel, turns on the same like circuits within your mind and body that teaches you to be fearful, to be in chronic stress, and therefore you tend to think worse, make worse choices, become more emotional, more drained, more lethargic, because intense emotions are very draining on us. And that's how you fall into depression. This is why you don't want to move around and experience a lot of things. This is why people tend to be more inert when they're depressed, because they're just exhausted. They don't have the energy to learn something new, to develop a new skill, to go out to communicate, give more, share their learning, you know, start something new, create something new. They're not in that, because they're acting out that stress response, right? It's been turned on, they don't know how to turn it off. And the problem is, and this is where what really frustrates a lot of people, is that people teach themselves to become addicted to these types of stress. That's right, we get addicted to the stressful, egoic, mental, emotional patterns that we live out every single day, because God forbid if we didn't experience anything at all. So people, in many ways, without even knowing, are choosing their addictive patterns over just mindless, laborious, boring day-to-day activities. And yes, we become addicted to the stress response because it makes us feel a certain way. It makes us feel alive, even though it's in a really negative way. It does make us feel alive, and we become addicted to these things because we can predict that we're going to have control, that we're going to feel this kind of way. We're going to be uncertain and thus experience variety in terms of, you know, how will it affect me today? Am I going to get really emotional? Am I going to have an argument? Am I going to create conflict? You know, am I going to create something interesting out of today because of these emotions? There's that variety that people experience on a day-to-day basis, whether wittingly or unwittingly. You know, we feel significant. You know, these are my problems because this is what I'm going through, and then you feel really significant, and you make yourself really, like in a narcissistic way, you make yourself feel like everything revolves around you, or that happened in the world, and it's because I created that kind of thing that happened, or that it happened for me, or you start to big things up and see it from your perspective and act like you're the only person in the world. And that's what happens when we become fearful and really egoic and acting out of fear. We can become more selfish. So the more selfish someone is, you can really think the more pain they are suffering from in many ways, even though they might look incredible or be incredibly wealthy. If they're very much focused on themselves and how they look, then there's a great deal of suffering and lack that they're experiencing in their lives. So yes, the stress response can be turned on just by thoughts alone. There are 3 types of stress, okay? We have physical stress, which is through trauma, which is experienced through like accidents or incidents and all kinds of physical things, injuries that occur. We have chemical stress, which is turned on due to blood sugar levels, due to our hormones, our level of sleep affecting our circuitry and these sorts of things. Bacteria, viruses, heavy metal like mercury, all these sorts of things that over time, if we don't find ways of releasing it through sweating, exercise and healthy nutrition, it leads to all kinds of age-related illnesses as well, like Alzheimer's, dementia, and so on and so forth. And the last type of stress is also emotional stress. Emotional stress through what you're experiencing, your thoughts, your emotions, what's happening at work, professional stresses, if you want to call it that. Personal stresses like in your relationship, having issues with self-esteem and confidence. This is all about emotional stress. And those 3 types of stress really leads to what's generally speaking called oxidative stress. So when we experience oxidative stress, which can happen through overtraining, undertraining, being inactive, sleep disorders, being anything that knocks us out of homeostasis for a sustained period of time, emotional abuse, lamenting and grieving over a loss of some sort of separation or loss in one's life, really poor nutrition, exposing yourself to pollutants, pesticides too much, heavy metal build up, if you will. All these sorts of oxidative forms of stress, what it does is it creates lots of free radicals in your body. And these free radicals, I tend to use the analogy of them being someone who robs and steals. If you're someone who robs and steals from other people, it's because you feel like you're lacking something, you want to take from something else. And that's what free radicals, ill things with diseases, mental, emotional diseases in instances, they go and harm and take electrons from healthy cells, and therefore damaging the DNA within these cells, and therefore making them unhealthy and making them free radicals because they miss those electrons. But when you have things like polyphenols and flavonoids and you eat colourful fruit and vegetable and earth-grown things that are organic, the antioxidants helps to give, if you will, the electrons to these harmed cells, so that it stops that chain reaction within us. Yes, so whenever we get preoccupied with the following 3 things, that's how we can gauge whether we are in that fearful response, if it's been triggered and stimulated. So whenever we are preoccupied with the body, whenever we are preoccupied with the environment where we are, and whenever we are preoccupied with time, anything relating to time, these are indicators that we are now being run by our egoic conditioned consciousness, and therefore acting out of fear, acting out of lack. And we want to get out of that. We want to return to homeostasis and become balanced again. And to make sure our neurotransmitters start to function appropriately, appropriate production of and levels of like serotonin, GABA, these kind of inhibitors, and also things like appropriate expression of norepinephrine and epinephrine, these kinds of powerful neurotransmitters, to make sure that we remain balanced, our immune systems function appropriately, our gastrointestinal functions and systems are operating optimally, we're sleeping well, we're not irritable, we're not overly excitable and restless, and all these things that happen when we are knocked out of homeostasis and acting out of stress. So what do I mean by body, environment, and time. So whenever we are preoccupied with the body, you know, how we look, looking perfect, being preoccupied with the physical form, then we are firstly living within a limited experience, because, you know, we are finite beings. You know, we are born, we do certain things very much the same from one person to another. We experience similar emotions throughout our lifetimes, and we die in this physical realm, of course. And we may have different bodies as we get older, but the more we identify with the body, the more we are focused on looking youthful, looking energetic. And there's nothing wrong with looking after yourself, but it's not accepting life's natural progression, if you will, evolution. And then that's when we start to become too attached to the physical form, and therefore we suffer, because when we start to think about the body, I'm not good looking enough, I'm not this enough. And this is something that's really accentuated, especially in Western society, where a lot of people suffer. We're made to think like if we don't look perfect, which is impossible anyways, if we don't look perfect, then we don't deserve love, we are unworthy of happiness, joy, abundance, and all these sorts of things. Then we teach ourselves to look after ourselves, yet suffer simultaneously, which is completely ironic and does not make sense at all. But hey, it's one of our ideologies that we're going to need to address for sure. So when we get preoccupied with the body, with how we see, how we appear, wanting to appear perfect, you know, having a great reputation, wanting to be seen as though you can do anything and everything, that kind of pressure mounts, and pressure is a synonym for stress. When we feel overwhelmed and we're preoccupied with external things and not internal, and acting out of abundance, joy, love, peace, and these sorts of lovely blissful states. And yes, the environment, when we're overoccupied with where we are, who is in front of us, who we're speaking with, what they're thinking of us, our labels, what we identify with, you know, how we dress, how other people dress, how we communicate with one another. When we're preoccupied with the environment, then we also feel limited. We're also acting out of survival mode, because we feel like we have to change who we are and how we are, depending on the circumstance in which we find ourselves, where we are, whether you're in office, at the gym, at your home, at a conference. You know, and when you go into these physical environments, it turns on specific mental, emotional circuits within the brain that make you perceive things in a certain way and adopt a certain kind of physiology and way of acting. Your mental, emotional, and physical patterns that ensue are predetermined by our physical environment, and I'm here to teach you that we need to override that, and we need to think greater than how we feel, because if we're not, then we are conditioned to behave in ways that that are familiar. And you know, the entire point of this video is to teach you to be more positive, more optimistic, happier, more abundant, more blissful, more conscious, more awakened, more enlightened. And the only way we're going to do that is if we rise above our physiological body, exemplifying our unconscious here. So our unconscious, like I said before, is built on familiarity about what we've done so often that we begin to associate it with who we are, our identity. And the only way we're going to change that and override that is to kind of force ourselves to do new things, to experience new things, to develop new skills, and therefore stimulate neuroplasticity. And I'll talk about that a bit later on as well. So part of happiness and success, and overall, I actually didn't finish. So I spoke to you about the body, I spoke to you about the environment and time. So whenever we are focused on, whenever we're time bound, that kind of, and operating in that kind of limited time bound consciousness, and we're over observe, and we might be physically here, but if I were here doing this video with you now, but I'm thinking about what happened to me a day ago, or 5 days ago, or 5 weeks ago, and I'm living in fear and I'm stressed and all these sorts of things, then I'm not present in the moment, and therefore I'm suffering. I'm lost in the chaos, the compulsive thinking of my egoic consciousness, of my kind of conditioned patterns. And there's no way you can feel abundant, happy, blissful, loving, grateful, and all these kind of beautiful states, and connect more deeply with people if you're acting out of fear. So whenever you're lost in the past, focused on time, whenever you are negatively connecting with the future, because I personally believe that there are some beautiful things to be gained from experience in terms of our brainwave states, in terms of moving towards the things that we want in our lives and being a better, more giving human being, then we're going to need to project positive portrayals of the future. However, you know, a lot of people operate by thinking about worst case scenarios, and you know, I like to think of it as preparing for the best situation, expecting the best, but being ready for the worst. So that means you're kind of covering the whole spectrum of possibilities, right? Either something's going to go amazingly, which is what you're focusing in on, and if it doesn't go that way, then you're at least ready to deal with things if it was the worst case scenario. So that's the kind of mindset that I adhere to in order to make sure that I move toward the things that I want, the abundance, the attraction that I want to generate, the energy that I want to create within myself, and therefore what I breathe and inhale into my life, if you want to see it that way, metaphorically speaking. Then that's how we create, because a lot of people, because they suffer and because they teach themselves in terms of their subconscious programming, like how to, they think themselves that limited by their past. They have these kind of limited aspects within themselves where they feel even if they had some really bad things happen to them in the past, you can't use the pain of your past today in the present moment, this is how a lot of people live, and that's why they live in stress, living within their ego, are incapable of stepping outside of their comfort zone, experiencing anew, because they're too busy lost in their past. And whenever you are thinking about the past, you're being emotionally branded, like you are conditioning yourself that this is the way you're going to live, and you cannot create something better in your life if you're waking up on a day-to-day basis remembering painful past experiences, reasons why you can't move forward. And you can't use that, because people use their own limited stories, their egos, to justify why they can't get better in their lives in many different ways. It can be really, really deleterious to our mental, emotional health and the future if we're living like that. So a lot of people, like I said, even though there are some valid reasons for people to be upset about their past, for example, if you live there every single day, then it's like you're living that Groundhog Day. So if you're a lot of people, like if you're abused, if you overcame addictions, if you experience great loss, if someone left you or something, you had some kind of incident in the past, and if you live that on a day-to-day basis, what happens is you condition your body to feel that way, and therefore you attract bad things into your life as well. Like, have you ever known someone who seemed to get into several kind of incidents or accidents within close proximity? There's a reason for that. It's not just being unlucky, it's what you're attracting. Have you ever met someone who tends to go out often, and they often finds themselves attracting really hostile, aggressive people, and they're like, I don't know what happened, I was just having a good time out, and then we got into a big fight, big brawl, what happened? And then, oh my gosh, 2 weeks later the same sort of thing happened. You're attracting what you put out there. So if you have an aggressive or an angry body, if you will, an angry unconscious, then you're going to move towards that, you're going to focus on that, you're going to zoom in on only those kind of things. And people attract these sort of things in many areas in their lives, and we can change it. It's going to take a lot of effort, it's going to take patience, it's going to take a lot of love, and I'm going to talk more about that later on. So the only way we're going to be able to think greater than how we feel is to kind of force ourselves to do things, because we are battling our own unconscious, guys, and this is the truth of things. So I want you to see your unconscious as though it's like your pet, because whenever you want to embark on a new practice, something really positive and wonderful, such as writing in your diary, writing out your goals, meditation, exercising on a regular basis, working towards certain projects or priorities or important things in your life, what will happen is your unconscious is very cunning, very intelligent, and it's very persuasive, and it will look to kind of deter you from continuing those practices, and it's very intelligent. So say, for example, if you said to yourself, from now on I'm going to become more peaceful, more relaxing, I'm going to become more synchronistic, I'm going to start to meditate every day for 10 minutes, and then say the next day you sit down to do your meditation, and then after a minute or two you're like, yeah, that's enough of that, let's get up, going, you've got things to do, you've got quite busy, you've got to see that person, you've got to go there, you've got a meeting at this time, and then you're being determined by your stress response, by time, projections of the future, and you're letting that deter you and put you off from doing something that you need to do, aka meditation in this example. So really, the hardest part about change, guys, is to stop doing the things that you're used to doing, and that's interrupting, if you will, that addictive pattern that you've instilled in your brain over time and your body over time. You're going to need to force yourself to do the uncomfortable, because the uncomfortable is where growth is. We need to move towards the unknown, and then therefore make the unknown, challenging yourself, making yourself better, progressing in different areas in your life, that will need to be the new known. And then you're constantly challenging yourself again, then you do more new things and developing new skills, any kind of skills, it doesn't really matter, as long as it's appropriately challenging, because you want to experience flow as well. So yes, experience new things, because and one way that we can move towards doing that is by asking yourself new questions. Questions are incredibly important because questions direct your focus. So if you wake up and you ask yourself a negative question like, why can't I change? Then your brain's going to go through its historical artifact. Or, oh, you can't change because remember 20 years ago when you started the diet and you want to change, you want to get into a fitter shape, and you want to be healthier, and you want to overcome these illnesses and diseases that you've developed over time. Remember 20 years ago when you tried the diet for a couple of weeks and it didn't work, and you lost a couple of pounds and then you just gained it all back again after? You've tried everything, haven't you? Don't do it. You kind of look, you look for answers to justify why you can't change. So instead of asking these debilitating questions, instead get used to asking positive, open-ended questions such as, how can I change? What will enable me to change? What do I love about myself? How can I overcome this hurdle or this challenge? How can I think more positively? There's a big difference between saying to yourself, why am I so negative? And the possible negative answers that derive from that, and asking yourself, how can I be more positive? Because it opens up so much potential, so many opportunities that you can move towards. And then when you open up that new door, and you get familiar with that space, then you start to ask newer questions. That opens up the doors for newer opportunities, new choices, new perceptions. Then you start to challenge your limiting beliefs over time. You start to activate neuroplasticity and therefore neurogenesis, becoming more intelligent, more energized, creating new energy internally. And now over time, when you do that, you begin to believe more in your internal world rather than being dictated by your external world. What other people think of you, how they perceive you, how they limit you, how they label you, that all that sort of stuff. It doesn't get through your armory anymore. You're now so strong that you don't let anything affect your mental emotional patterns, because you have taken control of your states and you have taught yourself to execute these states at a very high level. So yes, new thoughts stimulate new results. It creates new opportunities. It creates new voices. You know, there are many reasons why really successful businessmen and women, for example, they like to get new people in their key significant meetings for their businesses. Why? Because it's new person, new perspective, new information, new ideas, new opinions, and that's going to shake things up rather than getting the same kind of people in the same kind of thinking patterns doing the same sort of things. No, bring something fresh, bring something novel to the table, and therefore that's what's going to kickstart change. So you need new thoughts, you need to ask yourself new questions, and be cautious of these questions. And yes, questions are incredibly important, and not just questions, but also the vocabulary that we use, how we get ourselves energized in order to do something. And this is key, because there is a clear distinction here between motivation and inspiration. So motivation simply means wanting to achieve something. It's normally result driven. You want to accomplish a certain thing, and therefore it's linked to your ego. Now, whilst there's nothing inherently wrong with being motivated, we have to understand what it means, because there's a difference between motivation and inspiration. Motivation is when you try to force an outcome. It's like when you want to work towards something, or you want to force yourself to get a promotion, or you want to force a business to work, or you want to force a relationship to start working. And whenever you're forcing something, it's unnatural, and therefore you're going to create all kinds of complicated energies, if you want to call it that, and things that start to work against you. And whenever you push, anything else wants to push back. It's kind of energy. What you put out there comes back at you. So if you're trying to push to make something work, if you're trying to force an outcome, if you want to try to force positivity or change in your life, obviously, I know earlier I said the importance of kind of forcing yourself to do new things, but in this instance, I'm saying about not being patient and being because when a lot of people want to improve things in their life, they're very much time bound. Again, remember I told you, time, the body, your environment triggers the stress response on, and that's why people get really stressed out when they are motivated, because they feel like they have to get through them, but all these obstacles in the way, time's in the way, I don't have enough time in the day, I don't have enough people helping me in the day, and then it exacerbates and proliferates their stress response. Then they start to think, you know, I'm not good looking enough, I'm not attractive enough, I'm not thin enough, I'm not tall enough, I'm not muscular enough, I'm not these things. And now they're living in survival mode again. Now that stress response has been triggered yet again. And then they start to think about their environment. Oh, when I go down, I have to speak this way, I have to be that way, I can't be myself because people aren't going to like that, I'm like this and that. And then you start to become overly occupied with your ego, your identity, and therefore you're going to find it very difficult to achieve the things that you want. So yes, you can still accomplish a great deal when you're acting out of motivation. However, that's not the preferred method if you're going to achieve it. Instead, become inspired. And inspiration is more like a pulling nature. It's when you start when you are doing things for a greater good, and it's not just about you. When you're motivated, people who are motivated tend to be quite narcissistic and focused on themselves and what they want in their lives. But when you're inspired, you start to create, you start to do, you start to open up new avenues and opportunities, and you actually become very fortuitous, and you attract a lot of luck, if you want to call it that. Because when you do something with a clear vision, with a clear intention, and therefore using your brain, that's what we do when we have a clear vision, when we want to accomplish something, we have a clear purpose, we have goals in mind, long-term goals that we want to accomplish, and work our way back to medium-term goals and short-term goals in terms of actions and these sort of things. When we have a clear intention using our brain, and when we couple that up with, when we marry that with a powerful emotion, an elevated, a more blissful emotion, and then these two things merge and it becomes very, very much synchronistic. And this synchronicity, this brain and heart coherence is what enables you to perform at your best, and your brain will change. And I'll speak to you a bit later on about this. But this is what inspiration is: a vision coupled with wanting to do the right thing for a greater good. Those two things, these two forces become, when the mind and the body are coherent, that is God, that is that greater intelligence, that is that source, whatever you want to call it, that's working alongside you, and you get that extra push, that extra support to make sure something happens, because you're doing it with so much clarity, with so much pure emotion, with so much consciousness, because you're doing something for the greater good of humanity. You're creating out of good rather than for your own egoic needs, and therefore acting out of lack. That's when you are inspired, and that's when you'll start to be pulled towards your goals. You don't have to force it anymore like you did because you're motivated and you're trying to do things for your ego, just for your own family, or just yourself in your own relationship, and you're acting out of survival mode, and you're acting out of scarcity, and you have that fixed, closed mindset of, I'm doing this for me, I don't have enough things, I'm just trying to keep on to the things I have now. They're not yours anyways. Nothing ever is. So yes, these are the challenges we face. And if we're going to create new opportunities, if we're going to become more abundant, more positive, more optimistic, we need to learn. Because what happens is, and let me briefly mention this as well, a lot of people use their past to hold them back. And the problem is, science has now shown that 50% of our past, when we recollect it now, today, for example, it's completely untrue. It's well, not completely untrue, but it's very much inaccurate. So if I got you to retell me something that happened 10, 15, 20, 30 years ago, you'll tell me a story, but it wouldn't be the exact story that you experienced back then, because your brain is different. You experience these different things over time, and it's changed your beliefs, your perceptions, your emotions, and so on and so forth. It's like playing that game Chinese Whispers with someone. You know, when you tell someone a story, and that new person's got to tell someone else the story. Depending on how many people you do it with, over time the story changes and morphs, and the characters change, and the plot changes, and the climax is different, and it ends differently, because over time, and the different memories, the different experiences that have transpired since then has changed as well. So yes, many of our past memories aren't even the same, which means really they are fictitious and illusory. Just like when you think about the future, that's illusory as well. So a lot of people use their past to justify their current situation, but if your past isn't even true, then that's a complete facade. It's completely false what you're doing in the first place, which is my way of kind of teaching you here. Don't be preoccupied with the past. Be focused on the present moment in particular, and where possible, imagine the kind of future you want to move to, a more positive, uplifting, empowering projection of the future. So I want to talk to you about what happens when we learn. So when we learn something new, we double the amount of connections in the brain from 1,300 connections to 2,600 connections. This is great because it stimulates neurogenesis, the creation of new neurons in the hippocampus within your brain, in your limbic brain. You become more intelligent. That level of intelligence increases energy. You're able to take control of your life. You start to create and do new things. You're more confident to step outside of your comfort zone and challenge yourself appropriately in different avenues in your life. You're more open. You say yes to things more and all these sorts of things. And that's what's going to enable you to break through in your life and change your personality, who you are, and therefore the results that you get in your life. So yes, you want to learn new things, but not just learn new things, but you're also going to want to retain that knowledge, because what happens is there is something called a forgetting curve. So say if you learn something really powerful, say if you're really enjoying this video and you think, you know what, I'm learning this, that's fantastic, that's great. What happens is within just 48 hours, you can potentially forget up to 80% of what you're hearing in this video. That's that's astounding. And that's why we need to revisit the information that we listen to. So that might mean, for example, listening to this video several times a week until it becomes a subconscious program. So, it can take between 66 days to 365 days for a pattern to be deeply instilled in your unconscious. So you're going to need to be patient. You need to revisit information to turn it from your short-term memory to your long-term memory, and sleeping well will help with that memory retention as well. So make sure you are taking care of yourself by sleeping well and putting yourself first. What I mean by that is making time to develop yourself by some of the principles and strategies I'm outlining in this video, because if you don't, then really you're saying that you are unworthy, and therefore that's going to increase stress, and that's going to enhance your egoic thinking, making you less enlightened, less awakened, making you make the same kind of mistakes over and over again, and therefore not getting the same kind of results, the same kind of negativity, the same kind of painful activities you're going to attract into your life because you are unchanging. So put yourself first by learning these sort of things, by stimulating neuroplasticity. So I advise you to do new things, go to new trips, go on new holidays, go to new courses, new workshops, read new books, challenge yourself, not just that, but develop new skills. That's right. If you don't know how to swim, learn how to swim. If you don't know how to ride a bike, learn how to ride a bike. If you don't know how to invest in stocks and shares, learn how to invest in stocks and shares. If you don't know how to use a jiu-jitsu and practice that martial arts, then get into that. If you don't know how to orchestrate and create a story or produce a piece of art, or learn how to play the violin or the piano, for example, whatever it is to you, develop new skills, because it turns on new circuits in your brain. It creates new connections, and these new connections over time will enable you to change, stimulating neuroplasticity, right? Neuroplasticity is just enabling your brain to restructure, rewire itself over time. So you get rid of old, archaic, limiting beliefs from your past, and you start to change them and supplant them with more uplifting opportunities and better quality thinking, more open questions, and these sort of things. And that's how you start to change your patterns, your behaviors, and what you attract into your life through stimulating neuroplasticity and therefore neurogenesis. So start learning new things, and it doesn't have to be just for reading. If you don't like reading, then go on courses, go on workshops, watch YouTube videos, whatever it might be. Immerse yourself in learning so you can make yourself more intelligent, and therefore stimulate BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor, in your brain. That's how you develop that kind of childlike sponge mentality, where you learn and acquire information better, you have clearer thoughts, you make more new connections amongst your neurons as well. And this is what enables you to have a better quality of life. So yes, stimulate neuroplasticity, neurogenesis, change your routines, because like I said before, when you go into new places, you turn on certain circuits, you behave in certain ways, you feel in certain ways, you think in certain ways, and therefore you're going to be unable to change if everything else around you is the same. So learn to think greater than how you feel, and develop that brain and heart coherence. And briefly, let me tell you how the stress response is triggered as well. So I want to take it back slightly. So what happens is, in the hypothalamus, when you experience a stressful response, doesn't matter what it is, an emergency, an incident, you've been given a new project, you don't think you're going to meet a deadline, whatever stresses you out, an argument or some kind of drama in your life, what happens is, in your limbic brain, the hypothalamus in your brain, it releases a hormone. That hormone then goes to your pituitary gland. The pituitary gland thereafter produces another hormone. That hormone then is signaled to your adrenal cortex, and in the adrenal cortex, that's what produces cortisol, the stress hormone. And when that has been triggered, it messes with your immunity and all your digestive systems, and you start to acquire colds and flus, and you start to make worse decisions, and you become injured for no apparent reason, like, how did I hurt myself? What's going on here? Why am I so sore today? I didn't even exercise. What's going on? You're internally breaking apart because of the stress response that's taken over, affecting your sleeping patterns and all these sorts of things, affecting your choices in terms of what you're eating, your nutrition. All these things are very much aligned. So be cautious of the stress response, and you can calm your stress response. And this is one of the best practices through breathing. There are different strategies that you can use, but the reason why you want to practice breathing in deeply, so that's inhaling deeply, holding your breath for several seconds, and then breathing out very slowly, as though you're breathing out through a straw. The reason why you want to start breathing calmly and deeply is because it turns off or reduces the amount of blood flow to your reptilian and your emotional brain, your limbic brain. The reason what that enables to happen is enables blood to flow to your frontal cortex, your forebrain, the best part of your brain. When the forebrain has been triggered and switched on, it's kind of like the emotional creative center of your brain. Is where your most best executive and best quality thinking takes place in your forebrain. And when that's been switched on, what happens is it enables great synchronicity and great communication between different parts of your brain. Your forebrain communicates with the back of your brain, the sides of your brain the hemispheres start communicating with one another. You start to think better, you open up more choices, you start to have more creativity, more brilliant things come to you in that state. And when you are breathing calmly and slowly, and you're reducing your brain frequency, and you're going from high beta brainwave state, which is an emergency, like thinking over 60 thoughts per minute, really stressed out, fearful, sweating, all that kind of physiological responses that happen when you're in high beta brainwave state, you calm it down and you fall more into calmer brainwave states. You fall into alpha, which is all about relaxed awareness, 30 thoughts or fewer. That's the creatives, when you're at your best creatively. When you're best able to learn, your subconscious opens up more when you slow your brain down. And then you enter theta, which is kind of drifting in and out of sleep, if you will. And delta is obviously sleeping. But when you go into those lower frequencies like delta and alpha, that's what you need to dip into in order to come back up and to experience gamma brainwave state. Now, gamma brainwave state is when you're highly alert, but it's like relaxed arousal. You are so aware, so observant, so much energy, and everything you have such high, strong brain and heart coherence. And your brain, different parts of the brain, the back and the front are communicating with one another, the sides are communicating with one another, great blood flow, great exchange. Everything's connecting, making sense. There's so much clarity, so much communication taking place. And that's when you begin to access gamma brainwave state. And it's the equivalent of imagine the musical instrument of a flute playing. So calm, so beautiful, so energized, full of love, abundance, gratefulness. And when you're in that state, because your best decisions come out of love. When you experience love, really potent things happen, because when you experience love, if I got you to think about someone you love, or someone you're really close to, or someone you really respect and appreciate and revere, what happens is when you think about something that makes you feel love, oxytocin is released in the pituitary gland. And when that happens, it sends blood and it produces a chemical called endothelial derived relaxation factor, which simply means, so let me go back one step. So when you release oxytocin within the pituitary gland, what happens is it produces and signals nitric oxide. Nitric oxide then opens up and produces a chemical called endothelial derived relaxation factor, which simply means it opens up the arteries connected to your heart. And when that happens, blood and oxygen inundates your heart, and you start acting and behaving out of love rather than stress and fear and anxiety and worry and fear and temperament. and all these negative emotions, you start acting out of love. And when you act out of love, you do supernatural things. This is supernatural consciousness. This is pure consciousness, where you start to do things. And it's so hard to stop people when you're acting out of love, because you become impervious, impenetrable. You are so strong, and you're far more resilient. You're able to deal with life obstacles and difficulties and make better choices more often when you're acting out of love. And the problem is, you cannot act out of love if you're experiencing fear. You cannot be loving if you're responding to your egoic consciousness, to that limited, confined, compulsive thinking, where you identify with the mind and who you are. And these are my limitations, these are my labels, these are my things, these are my luxuries, this is how much money I have, this is my gender, this is where I'm from, this is who I am. Anyone that's different to the things that I have is a threat, is seen evil, they're different, it's the unknown, I'm scared of you, stay away, because you question my identity. And that kind of stubbornness, that kind of egoic stubbornness, if you want to call it that, is what stops people from experiencing abundance, peace, love, joy, because they're acting out of lack and insufficiency. So yes, we can control our brainwave states. Mental rehearsing and visualization are exceedingly powerful. You want to utilize NLP, you want to project and vividly imagine the kind of future you want to move towards. So see it through your eyes, not as though you're seeing yourself from a third person perspective. See everything bright, colorful colors. Zoom in on whatever you are experiencing when you are envisioning the kind of future that you want to move towards and attract. If you want to add like audio and some kind of movement to the experience that you're cultivating and imagining in your brain, that's when you start to really believe, and you teach your unconscious to move toward that, because your unconscious cannot tell the difference between something that's actually happened in real life and also something that you've imagined in your life. So the more you imagine the beautiful things you want in your life, the more it kind of defeats, if you want to put it that way, your negative past conditioning of no, this is who I am, that's why I experience, that's why I can't achieve things in my life, these are the people who let me down, and that's why I'll never be the person I want to be in my life, because of these people who let me down, and that person fired me, and that person dumped me, and that person did that to me, and that person stole my money, and that's why I can't be happy and achieve the things I want. You're living out of lack, you're living in the past, and therefore you cannot think greater than how you feel, and therefore you are stuck to constantly relive what you've experienced so far, and that means attracting the same kind of negativity and so on and so forth. And so this is how you can start to take control of your mental emotional patterns. This is how you can start to change your state and therefore change your subconscious programming, so you start to attract greater abundance in your life, and you start to simultaneously move towards that great kind of awakeness, that kind of peace, that enlightenment that we seek. That's the art of happiness, peace and success. That's my book. Yes, you can get my book at Amazon. You can also get it at my store at www.alexgemstore. A fantastic read that's going to make you more enlightened, happier, more positive, more optimistic, and all these sorts of fantastic things that we're talking about. So let me briefly summarize to you some of the key things that we need to move toward, and some of the key principles that I've taught now. So we need to get out of our comfort zone, because the unknown, whenever we do something that is unknown, it will induce fear, because our ego is going to be thinking, this is unfamiliar, this is not what I'm used to. So we need to change and move away from our unconscious by partaking in new things, and therefore this area here is where you start to activate neuroplasticity and start to change the neural networks in your brain over time. This will make you more intelligent, that will make you more capable of change, and therefore taking control of one's life. You want to be more loving, because love defeats fear, and as we know, fear is linked to the ego and stress. We want to turn off the stress response through breathing deeply, and mental visualization. This is what's going to enable us to live in the future. I don't know what happened to this pen. It's going to enable you to live in the future. And and also exist in the present moment. So being in the present moment can be instigated through deep breathing as well. Present moment living is all about being focused on your senses, where you are right now, what you are doing right now. You're not being lost in the past, thinking about what's on, you're not ruminating on bad things that's happened, or negatively thinking about what bad things might ensue in the future. Instead, you're fully present in your conversation. There's a reason why people lose attention about 6 to 10 times per minute when talking with you. It's because they're involved in maybe beta to high beta brainwave states. Maybe they're actively involved in their own compulsive thinking. They're identifying with the mind too excessively. So breathing is a great method, along with visualization, meditation, for becoming more present, becoming more open, changing your physical environment. So change your routines. This might be a great opportunity for you to write down the kind of things that you experience on a regular basis, on a daily basis, and start to question what sort of activities can be changed so you can experience new things. And these are some of the processes that's going to enable you to really take hold of your life, to really change it, because the end goal here is new thoughts. Change your routines, change your thoughts, change your results, change your emotions. And this is what really instigates new thoughts, new thinking, neuroplasticity, neurogenesis, experiencing new things, new experiences, develop new skills, learn new things, but also not just learning, but revisit. What's going on with these pens? Also, yes, revisit that which you have learned, and this is going to really enable you to take control of your life and start to execute at a higher level. You want to teach yourself to experience gamma brainwave state. For you to experience gamma brainwave state, you're going to have to drop into lower brainwave states, which means calming down your thinking, not being so judgmental, critical, switched on, focusing on so many different things per minute. Calm down your centers, become focused on the present moment, give life and energy to your limbs, and then work your way up and send that energy through to your heart, and send that positivity and energy through to the top of your brain, and therefore enhance and create that gamma brainwave state where everything seems to be flowing better. You're so much more peaceful, more energetic, more enlightened, more aware, more conscious, and you start to. And for me, it's the difference between being in foveal vision, very like tunnel vision, which is what happens when you get lost in your ego and your compulsive, limited thinking and consciousness. And when you start to access gamma brainwave state, you start to become more open-minded, and you can start to see more into the periphery. Start to become more observant. You can pay attention to things. You have more of an overarching view of your entire situation, and therefore you're able to detach, and you're able to question your own thoughts, and you become the observer, the watcher of your own thinking. So start getting used to and paying attention to your thoughts. Question your thoughts, especially if it's negative. The more you question something, the more it loses its power and its validity. So get used to questioning your own thoughts, your own internal processes, and ask yourself, is this the way I want to feel? How can I change this? And then you'll start to come up with new answers in terms of new routines, new things to learn, more people to surround yourself. Decide who you want to be. Part of visualization is deciding who you want to be. Decide who you want to be, because this is key here. If you're going to change and become a new person, and that's what I'm advising here, that's what this is about. If you want to become more positive, more enlightened, more conscious, more happier, more abundant, more loving, more grateful, you're going to need to change your thoughts, your emotions, your behaviors, your attitudes, your mood, your beliefs, therefore your personality traits, and therefore your overall identity. And don't be too emotionally connected to your identity either, because this is a very form-based, limited consciousness that we're living at this time, and we need to rise above that and connect more deeply with people, rather than just that kind of basic level of consciousness of this is who I am, these are my things, this is only who you are, these are your things. Instead of looking for exclusivity and to be significant and special and unique, no, see the commonalities, see the similarities that you have amongst other people and these sorts of things. And that's what's going to enable you to become more abundant. And that's what's going to enable you to take control of your life, your emotional states. And then you'll start to understand that not every single thought you have is your own thought. Remember, we're battling our unconscious and also our own reptilian medulla, our reptilian brain, our primitive brain, if you will. So be positive to yourself. Even if you have a negative thought and you kind of feel yourself going back to the way things used to be, just experience the present moment. Whenever you get lost in your ego, whenever you get lost in stress or fear, just bring it back to the basics. Focus on your senses, where you are, how you're feeling, being aware of your physical senses, what you're wearing, what you're seeing, how you're breathing, what you might be tasting, what you're hearing. Just be, listening to, pay attention to the birds singing, pay attention to the sound of water, pay attention to these really kind of basic yet beautiful simple strategies, because the more you get involved in your ego, the less you pay attention to nature. So be very conscious of these sorts of things. So bring your awareness back to your breathing, to your senses, become more present in the moment. When you're present, say if you were feeling angry or frustrated or anxious or stressed, whatever you've been experiencing, allow that experience to be, because what will happen is when you become really present, you start to become the observer of your thinking and your state, because every single thought you have produces a new chemical in your brain, a likewise chemical. So a negative thought will breed a negative chemical. A positive thought will breed a new, a better, positive, more empowering chemical. And there's a feedback loop between them. They constantly affect one another until it leads to certain behaviors and therefore triggering different patterns and all those sorts of things that I've explained as well. So become detached from results, start to love the process, become inspired, become more focused. Catch yourself when you're getting lost in your ego and you want to control so many external factors. We can only control our internal processes, guys. Whenever you try to control other people's behaviors or what happens in your life, that's going to cause a great deal of affliction, and it's completely unnecessary, and it's impossible to do it anyway. So there's no point fretting over things that you can't control. Just do your best, show up, be grateful, be abundant, make the best choices that you can, experience self-love and operate at that higher level of consciousness. Have a great day, stay strong, and I'll see you soon.